Standing in the sun-drenched center of a glass-walled coastal restaurant at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, holding a heavy manila envelope containing divorce papers, I watched the man I had loved for 12 years carefully peel a jumbo tiger prawn with an immaculate, practiced precision that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. Julian had spent 5 meticulous minutes pulling the shell back in one continuous, elegant ribbon, removing the tail with surgical delicacy, and dipping the sweet white meat into lemon butter before gently placing it on the plate of the glamorous young woman sitting across from him. It was a flawless ritual performed with practiced devotion, a gesture that burnt like acid into my memory because 3 years ago, when I was bedridden with a high-risk pregnancy and my hands were so painfully swollen I could barely grip a fork, I had begged him to peel a single shrimp for me at our sunlit dining table, only for him to recoil in disgust, scolding me for asking him to soil his hands with messy seafood odors. In that glaring midday sun, watching his manicured fingers move with tender, practiced mastery for his mistress, the ultimate truth revealed itself: he had never lacked the patience or the skill, he had simply never loved me enough to offer it. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment right now to like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who might be quietly nursing a broken heart today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Our community thrives on stories that remind us that even when our world collapses in broad daylight, the human spirit possesses the miraculous power to rebuild something far stronger, wiser, and more radiant than whatever was lost in the shadows. To understand the weight of that single peeled prawn on a silver platter, one had to look back at the quiet, sun-filled beginnings of Audrey Vance's marriage to Julian. 12 years earlier, under the soft golden light of a summer morning, Audrey had married a soft-spoken, ambitious young medical resident who possessed nothing more than a rusted sedan and a heart full of grand dreams. Audrey had stepped away from her own promising career in architectural design, postponing her master's degree without a second thought to work 2 demanding daytime jobs, managing a busy downtown interior studio by morning and drafting blueprint revisions for a local contractor by late afternoon. Every dollar she earned went directly into paying off Julian's mounting medical school tuition and funding the humble daylight meals they shared on the porch of their modest rented cottage. She had loved him with an unreserved, selfless devotion, finding absolute joy in wiping the sweat from his brow after his 30-hour hospital shifts and decorating their tiny sun-filled kitchen with wild yellow daisies picked from the roadside. For years, Audrey believed that marriage was built on the foundation of quiet sacrifices made under the open sky. When Julian finally completed his surgical fellowship and secured a prestigious partnership at a renowned cosmetic surgery clinic in the city, the bright afternoon sun seemed to shine on them at last. Their financial struggles evaporated, replaced by a sprawling suburban home with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed every room in clear, natural light. Yet, as the years marched on, the warm warmth of their early days began to cool into an unspoken, chilly formality. Julian spent longer hours away at his sun-bathed medical complex, his speech becoming clipped and distant, his eyes rarely lingering on Audrey with the admiration they once held. Audrey tried everything to bridge the growing divide, preparing elaborate sunlit Sunday luncheons, arranging daytime garden walks, and keeping their home immaculate, blaming his growing indifference on the immense pressure of his high-profile medical career. The subtle shift in Julian's character became painfully clear during the summer Audrey carried their daughter, Maya. It was a difficult, high-risk pregnancy that left Audrey exhausted and physically vulnerable, confined to the sunlit sunroom of their house under doctor's orders. One radiant afternoon, when the aroma of fresh seafood wafted from a nearby seaside market, Audrey felt a sudden, rare craving for fresh steamed shellfish. Julian had returned home early for lunch, sitting across from her at the sunlit teak table. When Audrey gently asked if he could help her peel a few prawns because her fingers were severely inflamed and locked with joint pain, Julian had let out a sharp sigh of annoyance, dropping his linen napkin onto his plate. He told her plainly that he found the process utterly repulsive, that a professional surgeon's hands should never be stained with greasy residues or fish smells, and advised her to stick to plain vegetable broth instead. Audrey wiped a silent tear from her cheek under the bright glare of the afternoon sun, convincing herself that Julian was simply protecting his surgical hygiene, never imagining that one day those same hands would peel seafood with poetic tenderness for another woman. The illusion of Audrey's stable life dissolved completely on a clear, warm Tuesday afternoon when her longtime friend Clara, who managed events for a luxury waterfront pavilion, called her with an innocent question. Clara asked if Audrey was already on her way to the pavilion's sun-drenched patio for Julian's private anniversary celebration, mentioning how beautiful the floral arrangements looked under the midday sun. Audrey froze with her hand on the kitchen counter, her heart hammering against her ribs, because Julian had told her that very morning that he would be locked in emergency consultations at the hospital all day. Driven by an overwhelming instinct, Audrey put on her coat, picked up the legal portfolio she had quietly prepared weeks earlier after noticing unexplained withdrawals from their joint accounts, and drove down to the coastal bistro bathed in the dazzling glare of 2 o'clock sunlight. Walking up the stone steps of the oceanfront pavilion, the world around Audrey felt unnervingly bright and clear. Through the sweeping pane-glass windows, illuminated by the unyielding rays of the midday sun, she spotted Julian sitting at a prime corner table overlooking the sparkling blue harbor. Opposite him sat Genevieve, a vibrant 25-year-old medical sales representative who frequented his clinic. Genevieve was laughing, her face glowing in the afternoon light, while Julian looked at her with an intensity Audrey had not seen in his eyes for nearly a decade. But it was not merely their proximity that broke Audrey's heart, it was what Julian was doing with his hands. On the table between them sat a large platter of iced prawns and steamed lobster. Julian, the man who had claimed for years that he detested touching seafood shells, was fully engrossed in the task. With astonishing, surgical precision, pulling the shell cleanly away, removing the tail in one fluid motion, and carefully removing every trace of vein, he peeled prawn after prawn for Genevieve. He did it with a relaxed, joyful smile, occasionally wiping his fingers on a scented warm towel before dipping the seafood in garlic butter and feeding her directly. The effortless mastery of his movements proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was not a spontaneous gesture, it was a deeply ingrained, private ritual he had perfected over months of hidden daylight rendezvous while Audrey sat alone at home believing his excuses of grueling hospital work. Standing in the sunlit foyer, Audrey felt a strange, profound calm wash over the violent storm inside her chest. The pain was unbearable, yet the sheer clarity of the sight erased every remaining doubt, every lingering excuse she had carried for his neglect. The peeled shrimp on Genevieve's plate was the ultimate symbol of his betrayal, a visceral proof that Julian was capable of tenderness, effort, and care, but had deliberately chosen to withhold them from the wife who had built him from nothing. Taking a deep breath of the fresh afternoon air, Audrey smoothed her dress, clutched the heavy envelope firmly in her hand, and walked directly across the sun-drenched marble floor toward their table. The silence that fell over the surrounding tables seemed to echo in the bright room as Audrey approached. Julian turned, his confident smile freezing mid-air as his eyes locked onto his wife standing in the full glare of the afternoon sun. The color drained from his face instantly, his hands hovering awkwardly over the plate of peeled shellfish. Genevieve gasped softly, looking between the two of them in sudden panic. Audrey did not raise her voice, nor did she shed a single tear in that public space. She simply stood tall under the warm sky, looked Julian dead in the eye, and quietly slid the heavy manila envelope across the polished mahogany table, placing it directly over the silver shell peeling fork he had just laid down. Inside that envelope were fully drafted divorce papers, along with meticulous financial records compiled by a private auditor showing that Julian had spent over $100,000 of their shared savings purchasing an offshore luxury condo in Genevieve's name. Audrey looked at the glistening, perfectly peeled shrimp sitting on Genevieve's plate, then looked into Julian's trembling eyes, stating softly that it was remarkable how a man could claim his hands were too refined to peel a prawn for his sick wife, yet find the surgical precision to skin an entire marriage alive in broad daylight. Without waiting for a response, without creating a scene, Audrey turned on her heel and walked out into the brilliant afternoon sunshine, leaving Julian sitting in absolute, paralyzed humiliation before his colleagues and patrons. The weeks that followed the confrontation in the restaurant were filled with an agonizing yet necessary emotional rebirth for Audrey. She moved into a small, sunlit apartment near the city park with 3-year-old Maya, filling the space with green plants, sketchbooks, and the warmth of a fresh start. Julian, devastated by the public exposure and horrified by the sudden loss of his comfortable home life, launched a relentless campaign to win Audrey back. Every afternoon, he would send massive bouquets of white lilies to her apartment, leaving dozens of desperate voicemail messages begging for a second chance, swearing that Genevieve meant nothing to him and that he had simply lost his way in the pursuit of vanity and status. Julian even attempted to visit Audrey at her small studio during the bright afternoon hours, offering to surrender all his property and assets if she would only tear up the divorce papers. He promised that he would peel her seafood every single day for the rest of their lives, weeping openly on her porch under the glaring midday sky. But Audrey remained steadfast, refusing to allow hollow panic to substitute for genuine repentance. She calmly explained to him through the sunlit window that true love was not a theatrical performance performed only after being caught, it was the quiet, unprompted kindness offered when no one else was watching. She did not hate him, nor did she harbor venomous anger, but she recognized that their marriage had ended long before she walked into that seaside bistro. During this period of intense emotional struggle, Audrey made a conscious choice not to drown in bitterness. Instead of viewing her 12 years with Julian as a total loss, she chose to see them as a masterclass in resilience. Under the bright morning skies, she picked up her architectural drafting pens for the first time in a decade, submitting her old portfolio to a prestigious graduate program in sustainable urban architecture. The admissions panel was deeply impressed by her mature perspective and unique eye for daylight integration in public spaces, granting her a full scholarship to complete her master's degree. Audrey poured her soul into her studies, spending her afternoons designing sunlit community centers, playgrounds, and affordable housing complexes that brought beauty and light to families in need. Meanwhile, Julian's world began to unravel with terrifying speed under the harsh light of reality. Once the divorce proceedings commenced in broad daylight, the financial audits exposed severe irregularities in his clinic's accounting practices, revealing that he had misused partnership funds to finance his lavish lifestyle and cover up his affair. The prestige he had worked so hard to build crumbled overnight. His partners ousted him from the surgical practice, the medical board issued a formal reprimand, and Genevieve promptly abandoned him the moment his bank accounts were frozen and his social standing evaporated. Sitting alone in a cramped, rented studio apartment during the bright, unyielding hours of the day, Julian was finally forced to face the empty husk of the man he had become. The true turning point of the story arrived nearly a year later on a crisp, sun-drenched autumn afternoon in the central city park. Audrey was sitting on a wooden bench near the duck pond, watching little Maya laugh as she chased fallen golden leaves under the bright blue sky. A shadow fell gently across the grass, and Audrey looked up to see Julian standing a few feet away. He was almost unrecognizable from the polished, arrogant surgeon who had sat in the luxury bistro a year prior. He wore a plain, worn jacket, his hair was graying at the temples, and his eyes carried a profound, quiet humility that had never been there before. Julian did not approach with grand speeches or defensive excuses. He asked quietly if he could sit on the far end of the bench, keeping a respectful distance under the warm afternoon light. He told Audrey that he had spent the last 8 months working as a general staff physician at a low-income community health clinic on the outskirts of the city, spending his daylight hours treating elderly patients and underprivileged children for a fraction of his former salary. For the first time in his life, he had learned what it meant to serve others without expecting praise, vanity, or applause. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked at Maya playing in the sun, admitting to Audrey that losing his career and status had been the greatest blessing of his life, because it was only in total ruin that he finally realized how horribly he had treated the woman who had given him her youth. Julian took a deep breath, looking Audrey directly in the eyes under the unblinking sun, and stated that he was not asking her to take him back, nor was he expecting her to ever forget the pain he had inflicted. He simply wanted to offer her a sincere, unreserved apology, not to win anything back, but because she deserved to hear it without any hidden motives. He confessed that watching her rebuild her life with such grace, dignity, and independence had shown him what true strength looked like. He promised to be an honorable, present father for Maya, supporting Audrey's choices and respecting her boundaries for the rest of his days. Listening to his broken yet genuine words under the afternoon canopy of gold and green, Audrey felt the final residual knots of pain dissolve within her heart. She realized that holding on to anger was like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to suffer. Forgiveness was not about excusing his past actions or returning to a broken relationship. It was about releasing herself from the burden of resentment so she could walk freely into her own bright future. Looking at Julian with serene, peaceful eyes, Audrey offered him a gentle smile, thanking him for his honesty and accepting his apology with absolute grace. They sat together on that sunlit bench for an hour, sharing a quiet conversation about Maya's school and future, establishing a healthy, respectful co-parenting relationship grounded in mutual respect and clear boundaries. Over the next 2 years, Audrey's life blossomed into a brilliant tapestry of success, joy, and emotional fulfillment. She graduated at the top of her architectural class, winning a national award for her innovative design of a daylight-focused children's rehabilitation center. She opened her own boutique firm, Audrey Vance Architecture, hiring young designers and fostering an environment of kindness, creativity, and integrity. Her bond with Maya grew deeper every single day, filled with sunlit weekend trips to the seaside, picnics in the park, and endless laughter. Julian kept his word faithfully, serving humbly at the community clinic, remaining an attentive, loving father to Maya, and always treating Audrey with the utmost honor and gratitude whenever he picked their daughter up for daytime weekend outings. Before we conclude this deeply moving journey of healing and transformation, we would love for you to pause and leave a meaningful comment below in our community section. What lesson did Audrey's journey teach you about self-worth, dignity, and the true meaning of forgiveness? Have you ever had to let go of a painful past in order to step into the bright light of your own future? We read every single comment from our growing family of viewers, and your personal stories and heartfelt reflections inspire us every single day. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. On a radiant Sunday afternoon 3 years after that fateful day at the coastal restaurant, Audrey stood on the spacious wooden balcony of her newly designed architectural studio overlooking the glowing ocean harbor. The midday sun blazed brilliantly across the clear blue sky, casting a golden light over the gentle waves below. Inside the sunlit office, Maya was sitting at a small drafting table, happily drawing colorful pictures of houses with yellow suns, while Julian waited patiently near the entrance, holding a box of fresh watercolors he had bought for his daughter's birthday. Audrey walked inside, handed Julian a glass of fresh lemonade under the warm afternoon light, and exchanged a warm, peaceful smile with him. There were no longer any lingering shadows, no bitter regrets, and no unhealed wounds. Standing tall in the full beauty of the daytime sun, Audrey knew that the worst moment of her life had become the very doorway to her liberation, proving that when you have the courage to walk away from disrespect, you make room for a life filled with unconditional hope, self-respect, and everlasting light.